It's been a year since I switched from Canon to Fuji. It's time to break it down and find out if I made the right choice. Before we get started, quick reminder, be sure and check out my podcast. It's called Photobomb. It's available anywhere that podcasts are found. Me and my friend Gary Hughes do it every week. It's a lot of fun. We keep you up to date on photography news, and we just have a good time. So be sure and check it out. Also, join my group on Facebook. It's called Pro Photo Talk with Blu-ray Perry. It's a great community, and it's a great place to ask questions and talk to each other and get help. All right. A year ago, I switched. I was a DSLR shooter. I shot with Canon, full frame, the 5D Mark III with my system. And because of the pandemic, I had lost so much work. I had all this free time on my hands, and I thought, well, now would be a good time to make that leap. I want to make the leap to mirrorless, so let's go ahead and do it now when I'll have time to get used to the camera instead of having 3 days with the camera before I had to go in and start using it on a job. So I made the leap, and not only did I switch to mirrorless, but I also switched from full frame to APS-C, which was a very big deal because people usually don't go back. They might start with APS-C, but then they go up to full frame. And throughout the course of this video, a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about, I've already made little videos about these specific issues, and when I can, I will put the link up here, but YouTube actually limits the number of links that you can put up here. So it's a good idea, if you're interested in this, to go and take a look at all my videos because there's going to be something there for you regarding this issue. So I made the leap. I bought a whole new kit. And I have a video that breaks down everything that I bought and how much I paid for it. And price was a really big factor in making this decision, but also quality and whether or not I thought an APS-C could do the work that I needed it to do and live up to the standards I had already set with my full frame DSLR. All right, so I've made a list. I've broken these things down into categories, and we're going to take them step by step and talk about the things that I like and the things that I don't like after a year of full-time working with the Fuji X-T4. Here we go. Let's go ahead and get this one out of the way. The Fuji X-T4 has horrible ergonomics. I've talked about this before, and I've said, I'll get used to it. And I am getting used to it, but it doesn't change the fact that it really has horrible ergonomics. It is a beautiful camera. We love the way these cameras look. It's one of the things we love about Fuji, but the ergonomics are not good. The first thing I did was add a little grip to the front so that I could get a better grip on the camera. But even then, if you are a person like me who holds most of the weight of the camera in your right hand when you are shooting, you support with the left hand, but still you're constantly moving the camera up. If you're slinging it or you're wearing it on your hip, you're constantly moving up like this, which means you're bringing it up like this. And you've got to have your finger up here, you see. So you have to shift your hand on the bottom. And as a result, right here, the corner of the camera digs right into your palm. And whenever I shoot a wedding or a bar mitzvah, after about 2 hours, I start to get a really red spot right there in the base of my palm. Now, hopefully, over a few years, I'm going to build up a nice callus there. But it's just not great ergonomically. It's not a deal killer, though. But I had my photo booth out at a bar mitzvah last weekend, and I use an old Canon camera in my photo booth. And when I picked it up, instantly the change and the difference of picking that camera up with its big full grip was so much. I was like, oh yeah, this is so much more comfortable to carry around all day than the Fuji X-T4. It's the price you pay for what are arguably the most beautiful cameras on the market today, is that they're not necessarily the most comfortable cameras on the market. Next up is autofocus, and it's tough for me to talk about the autofocus on the Fuji X-T4 because I came from a camera that didn't have eye autofocus, right? So to me, anytime the camera focuses on the eye automatically for you and gives you a good clean focus, well, that's just a miracle. I think that's fantastic. But if you talk to people who own Sony cameras, they will tell you that Sony focuses much faster and much better when it comes to eye autofocus than the Fuji cameras do. I can't talk about that because I don't shoot Sony. So if you're comparing those two cameras, I'm going to acknowledge that Sony probably has a better autofocus than Fuji does. Canon might have a better one as well. But I can tell you my practical experience, and it is this. If I've got the camera set on a tripod and I'm doing headshots or I'm doing school portraits or I'm working in a temple and I'm shooting groups, family groups or whatever, the auto eye focus works just great. I don't have a problem with it. I really don't. It finds the eye every time, it focuses and it locks in. And I can tell you that I have never had images as sharp as the images that I get from the Fuji X-T4. One of the big reasons I switched from my Canon when I did was I was beginning to experience some focusing issues, some softness that I wasn't happy with. I don't have that problem anymore with the Fuji X-T4. When I'm shooting headshots and stuff like that, I don't even look down. I just look at the client, I talk to the client, I work on the smile, and the Fuji grabs the eye and focuses every single time, and it's wonderful. I love it. Now, in an event situation, say I'm walking around the room in a wedding or a bar mitzvah and I'm taking pictures of people or table shots, I would say most of the time it works just fine. In a really dark room, it can have some trouble. If you are trying to use eye autofocus when you're taking pictures of, say, people dancing, well, that's just a recipe for disaster because there's too many eyes and the heads are moving away, and so I don't even use it there. When something is happening, like, say, the processional at a wedding, walking in, or say when they're doing the entrances during the wedding reception, I don't use the eye autofocus. Instead, I use a little bit bigger box and I just focus on the body. It's fast, it grabs focus clean. I have not seen a big problem at all with it missing focus using that system, but this is the old system. This is the way that I always shot in the past, and I'm imagining that there's a new crop of photographers coming up who just think, listen, the way it's supposed to work is it's always supposed to grab the eye and focus instantly for me, no matter what the situation. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's what happens when you use a Sony. Fuji's not quite there yet, but I'm okay with it because, again, I came up in a world where I didn't even have that feature, so now if I have that feature but I can't use it all the time, it's still a great feature to have. So I don't really have a problem with the autofocus on the Fuji at all. A big change for me was, of course, switching from a full-frame sensor to an APS-C sensor, and I've made a video about this. Go find it on my channel. I've talked in detail about this. I would say probably the biggest thing that I had to get used to was the f2.8 floor and the ISO of 160. With Fuji, your lowest ISO is 160. You can go lower if you want to, but if you want the best dynamic range, you shoot at 160. And what's funny about that is that may be true with Canon too. I mean, I always shot at 100, but it may be true that if you shot at 160, it was a little bit better. And it's just that Canon doesn't say that, whereas Fuji does. Fuji says we would prefer that you shoot at 160. So I do. I shoot at 160. So if you are outside, if you're on the beach, it's a really, really bright day. Now you're shooting at 160, which is 2/3 of a stop brighter than you would normally shoot on the beach. And if you want to get the same shallow depth of field that you got with your full-frame camera, you need to go a stop wider with the Fuji, which is another stop of light that you're letting in the camera. So it can be a problem in a really bright situation on a beach. It can even be a problem when you're working in a studio. If you're working in a studio, I've had situations where I was trying to get a super, super shallow depth of field on a portrait, and I can't turn the lights down low enough. My flashes can't be turned down low enough at ISO 160 and say 1.4. I can't get my lights down low enough, or my background light, I can't get it down low enough. So what I did was I ordered neutral density filters for my lenses, and I ordered some neutral density gels for my background lights. So now it's not a problem. I just keep a neutral density gel on my background light all the time, and I have no problem getting the background light down to where I want it to be. So it's a bit of a workaround compared to what I was used to with the Canon. With the Canon, I never really had to worry about that stuff. But it's not a big workaround, and I don't find myself really needing it all that often. Really, the background light thing is probably the most common time I use it. I don't really pull out a neutral density filter for the lens very often. How often are you shooting in the studio at 1.4? It just doesn't really happen that much. So that really hasn't been a problem. In terms of lenses and gear, well, hello APS-C, everything's cheaper. And I have absolutely loved that. I am very much enjoying looking at third-party lenses and primes and knowing that if I want to get a nice prime, I can pick one up for under $1,000. That's great, and I've really enjoyed that. So again, there's a whole video about this on the channel, so go look for it. But I can say that switching from full frame to APS-C has not been the big shock that I was afraid that it might be. I really have gotten used to it very quickly, and I don't even think about it anymore. I will say this, and this is a small little thing, because APS-C crop sensors, because they're smaller, the lenses are usually smaller, the mounts are smaller, right? So right here, this hole is smaller, And I find that switching, see it's happening right now, switching lenses in an event, I'm not as smooth with it. And maybe it's just something I have to get used to. But the hole, I feel it was bigger on the Canons, so it was just easier to find it and bang. And so I'm not as quick and smooth with it, but hopefully that's the sort of thing that's going to change over time, that I'll get faster with it. One of the things I was really worried about when switching to Fuji from Canon full frame was going to be low light performance. I work a lot in low light performance. I work in churches that you're not allowed to use a flash. I work at receptions that are pitch black, and I was really worried about the low light performance of this camera. But again, I'm coming from a camera that I never went above ISO 3200. So if this camera performs as well at 3200 as my old camera, then that's it. I'm good. That's all I really wanted, right? The question is, can it perform well at 6400? Well, in the tests that I've done and the shooting that I've done, I've shot at 6400. Of course, 6400 doesn't look as nice as 3200, but it's usable. It's fine. It's good. But what I found was most interesting was I don't seem to come across many situations where I need to be at 6400. Because when I'm working on an event or in an event, if you shoot at 6400 most of the time, you're going to let so much light in that now you're going to get motion blur. You can't drag the shutter. If I shoot at 3200, I'll let in some background light, and then I can drag the shutter. I can slow my shutter speed down to a 1/15 of a second, and really, bring in some more light if I want to, and bang, and I'm going to freeze. I get it right where I want it, and I'm going to get the people frozen with the flash and no movement. If I shoot at 6400, now I've got to raise my shutter speed, because at 6400 with my shutter speed at a 1/15 of a second, suddenly there's too much light coming in and I'm going to get motion blur. So now I've got to raise my shutter speed. In other words, I've been able to get the equivalent of 6400 all along, just by using my shutter speed. And now if I want to, I guess I can shoot at 6400 and raise my shutter speed up higher. I can do that. But it's the same result, the image is going to be the same, except now you're going to get 6400 grain, whereas before you were getting 3200 grain. So I guess it's a convoluted way of saying that I can shoot at 6400 now if I want to, but I've yet to find a situation where I really, really needed to. The closest I came was maybe in a Catholic church during a ceremony where I thought, maybe I want to go to 6400 here. But situations like that are few and far between, and if I had to do it, I could do it. So I have not been overly knocked by the fact that this camera is an APS-C camera when it comes to shooting at high ISOs. But again, I wasn't using the latest and greatest full-frame camera when I made the switch. So all I wanted was for this camera to live up to what my Canon 5D Mark III was doing, and I would say that it certainly does. I really thought that this was going to be a huge, huge problem for me, and it turned out not to be a big problem at all. The last two big events I shot an 8-hour wedding, and I shot a big bar mitzvah and reception, and I switched batteries once. I shot the wedding, and I swapped the battery. I went in with a fresh battery, and it lasted through the ceremony, and then I swapped to a fresh battery for the reception, and it lasted the entire reception. And that was an 8-hour day, and I didn't have a problem with two batteries. I have like 7 or 9 batteries because I was so worried about battery life, because I've heard such horrible things about battery life on these mirrorless cameras. I was so worried about it that I have a whole bunch of batteries, and it turns out I don't need all of these batteries. It also helps if you get in the habit of turning your camera off anytime you're not using it. And another thing that I do a lot is that I will keep the screen flipped around like that. So that keeps this screen turned off when you're just walking around. And this also is going to save your battery life. But really, overall, battery life has not been a problem switching from DSLR to APS-C, or rather DSLR to mirrorless. Buy a couple of extra batteries, you're going to be fine. Let's take a second and talk about one of the things that is unique to Fuji that I really, really love, and that's the film simulations. Now, when I'm working, I'm shooting in RAW, and then bringing it into Capture One to process it. So since I'm shooting in RAW, I can apply any film simulation that I want to once it gets into Capture One. But if you shoot in a film simulation, it will bring it in, and that will be the auto simulation. That will automatically be applied to every single image that you shot with that simulation working. So I'm a big fan of classic chrome, and I've done a video about that. You can go check it out. And I shoot in classic chrome most of the time. And so what I see on the back of my camera is going to match up with what I see once it gets into Capture One and it's using classic chrome. I am very surprised at how much I have come to love these simulations. I love the quick fix. I will do a headshot. I will shoot it in classic chrome. Then I will come back, I will put it into the program, and I'll look at it, and then I'll pop it around a little bit. Let's look at it in ProNeg High. Let's look at it in Provia. Let's look at it in a couple of different filming simulations, see how we feel about the color, see how we feel about the contrast, etc. I almost always come back to classic chrome. It's just my favorite. And one of the interesting things is I feel like I am now developing a look to my photography based off of classic chrome from Fuji that I didn't have before. Probably my clients maybe don't notice it that much, but of course I notice it, and so I am developing a look to my photography. This is Bure Perry Photography's look, and I like that. I really enjoy that. I've been a big fan of the film simulations. I enjoy them. I use them all the time, and it's been a very pleasant surprise because I'm not a one-click fix kind of person. You know, I never liked the whole idea of just buy this and you click this and it changes everything. No, it almost never works in every situation. You're going to have to fine-tune. If you're going to have to fine-tune, you might as well just start with the fine-tuning, right? So, but with the simulations, yeah, I really am enjoying using the simulations, and it was a pleasant surprise, and it's something you only get with Fuji. Well, we have to talk about image quality, right? We have to talk about overall image quality on the file. So let me say this about Canon. I have always felt that Canon produced the cleanest, spot-on color. You couldn't ask for a better, I don't want to say perfect, but you couldn't ask for a better starting point, right? Canon, they did a good job with color. Their images are clean. Generic might be a way to describe it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I've always kind of been a generic shooter. I pride myself on giving my clients images that aren't going to be out of style in 5 years, right? They're always going to be good because they're good, clean, correct color images. That's where I start. And then we go to Fuji. Fuji, it's a little bit like I was driving this really dependable, you can count on it, good SUV. And now I'm driving this quirky little fun sports car. I can still depend on it, but it's quirky. It's fun. You know, it's a manual shift, and the windshield wipers go in the opposite direction. I don't know, but that's the way it feels now being a shooter with Fuji versus being a shooter with Canon for all these years. Now I've got the film simulations to play with. I've got a little bit different color, the way Fuji renders color, and I like the way that Fuji renders color. And we really can't do a review of the Fuji X-T4 without talking about skin tone. How Fuji renders skin is definitely different than any other camera that I've ever seen. And it's noticeable. My wife noticed it, and my wife she does not pay attention to my photography at all, right? But she noticed it many years ago when I bought the Fuji X100S, and I started using it to take our family pictures around the house. She started requesting that camera. When I would take a picture of her, she liked that camera better than my Canon gear because she liked the way it made her skin look. And if you look at the way that Fuji renders skin, sometimes it's a little soft. Some people would say maybe it's a little mushy, for lack of a better word, but people like it. It's almost like a little bit of a built-in filter for the skin, but people like it, and I've grown to love it, and I especially like the way that they render color in the skin. I tend to like sometimes skin to have a little bit more of a red hue to it, orange for lack of a better word, and Fuji tends to do that. So image quality has been fine. I have not had anyone look at a single image that I've shot with the Fuji and question that it doesn't look like the images I shot with my Canon. There is no doubt, absolutely no doubt, that a Fuji X-T4 mirrorless APS-C camera can produce the images you need to be a full-time working professional photographer. No doubt in my mind. If there was a doubt, I would have gotten rid of this camera and gone back to a full-frame camera. I don't have any problem with it whatsoever. I'm happy with the images. I'm happy with the sharpness. I'm happy with the color. I'm happy with the overall tone. And more to the point, I like it. I like it. I'm more excited about my images now than I was with the Canon because now I'm driving a sports car, for lack of a better metaphor. So the bottom line is, as I'm sure you can guess by now, that I'm happy that I made the switch. It was a big jump for me to say, you know what, I'm getting rid of Canon and I'm getting rid of DSLR and I'm getting rid of full frame all at the same time. It was a huge, huge decision. I was really nervous about it, but it's worked out. There have been some quirks. There have been some, little things that I've had to work my way around, as there are with any changes that you make in your life. But in the end, I am enjoying this camera. I'm having a blast shooting with the Fuji X-T4. I am loving the images that come out of it. I'm liking the color. I'm liking the work process. It's just been fun all the way around. And there's no doubt in my mind that you can make this switch if you're thinking about switching to APS-C, and you will be happy with it if you give it a chance and you give it some time. You might actually be more than happy. You might be ecstatic. You might find yourself energized about your photography again, and maybe you haven't felt that way in a while. What you're definitely going to notice is that your wallet is going to be a little bit heavier when you're done, because making the switch to APS-C is going to save you some serious bank. Bottom line is, if you're thinking about making the switch, I say go for it. I think you're going to like it. I think you're going to come to love the camera. I think you're going to love the color, and that you're going to get re-energized about your photography if you make the switch to the Fuji X-T4. Thanks for watching.